Once Upon a Time Unprompted Writing podcast season finale, Izzy takes us into the battlefield, Erin tells her fantasy backwards poem, plus we have freelance writer and co-host of the podcast Views Our Own Mischa joining us, with his futuristic escape horror piece. This week our writing prompt is Hear me out, let's add more fire to the situation. Hit the theme tune. Hi guys, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi there, and can I say it was a lovely theme tune?
You're going to get the same question we ask every guest on here, which is, who are you and what do you like writing?
So, my name is Mischa Alexander. I am a freelance writer and theatre watcher, film critic, and I enjoy writing plays. I enjoy writing think piece articles and reviews of different things that I've seen, and I just enjoy the power of words and what they can do and the interesting ideas and stories that they can connect with. I'm a recent graduate from Warwick University, which is how I know your lovely hosts, and I'm currently taking a gap year before pursuing a master's. And as we mentioned previously, I'm currently the co-host of a podcast focusing on journalism and freelance writing entitled Views Our Own.
Where can we find Views Our Own if we want to hear more of your voice?
Well, I don't know why you would, but if you're interested, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, and Google Podcasts. And you can find all our links and all our information on Twitter and Instagram under the hashtag Views Our Own, where we tell you all about what episodes we're going to produce and what sort of work that we do. The first 3 episodes are available right now, with more coming every single Friday.
You have a schedule, and I appreciate that.
I love that we've finally got a guest who has an answer to what do you write. I think when we asked ourselves the question in the first ever episode, we all just crumbled. I write.
We don't know what we're doing.
I sit down and I write.
On a cover letter enough time to call me that to be able to say it with confidence.
So the prompt this week was, hear me out if we add more fire to the situation. How did you guys find it?
I thought it was a good prompt because it's just a good idea. It inspired me a lot. Just the idea of making a bad situation worse. I love that stuff. It inspired me a lot.
Yeah, I really like the idea of taking a very escalating situation. I thought it provided some useful, tension and drama and narrative investment as you take something that increasingly gets more stressful and more tenuous for the characters. And that's very much the theme I lent into with my piece.
This did come again from D&D because it's where all my weird prompts come from these days.
It has big D&D energy, I'll say that.
It does. We were on a ship in the middle of the ocean surrounded by pirates who wanted to kill us, 2 drakes, and vast amounts of fire. And someone tried to throw fire at a pirate and then realised that it was a terrible idea when the lovely Alex, who we've had on before, goes, hear me out if we add more fire to the situation. But then the ship sank, so that dealt with the fire problem, but we had a new problem, which was drowning.
A useful lesson to know for life, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Don't add fire, add water, and hope you can swim. Speaking of being in bad situations.
Flawless segue there,
Going
Erin.
with this.
I'm so tired. Mischa, we're going to jump onto your piece first. Are you ready?
I'm ready if the audience are. So my piece is called The Crystal Chasm. It's about a 2-page bit of prose that is partly inspired by this J.G. Ballard book. I think it's J.G. Ballard, The Crystal World, but with a bit of horror and Edgar Allan Poe tension thrown in there. As Alexei crouched down to better steady himself, the narrow beams of light from his helmet shot across the wall of crystals, barely a foot away from his protected face. He had never seen them so up close before. On a regular day, the mantra was always focus on the routine, not the product. Getting distracted was the easiest way to make a mistake, and even the smallest could result in disaster. But now he took a moment to pay attention to the dark rocks that stretched out in front of him in both directions. The surface seemed to go on further than any regular material, but deep inside, light bounced back an orange and purple glow that flickered and changed drastically with the slightest shift of the torchlight. He had heard that people back home had started using the fuel in art and clothing, and had laughed about it with his friends in the home life sector, like using oil for a shower, he had called it. But he could see the draw now. The colours were mesmerizing. The low hum of his headset tore him out of his spell. Just above his right eye, a small message icon flashed gradually, seemingly floating in mid-air rather than lying on the wall of his protective visor. He blinked twice in his right eye to open it, and a small computerized voice read out the message from the operator on the other side of the wall.
How much of the separator have you attached? As specific as you can, please.
Alexei checked the thick red cord he'd been attaching to the crystal's face. He had managed to get it up 10 feet by carefully climbing up a previously mined pile which had now reassembled in the cold air of the mine. The separating wire stretched back along with the crystal wall to the other side of the slope that he was in, only stretching up 7 feet that side, as there was nothing to climb on to get it higher. Stabling himself, he opened the keyboard on his left arm and typed a reply.
10 feet high on the left, 7 on the right. Connected.
It was a risky plan, of course, no matter how sound the science was, and he wasn't sure it was all that sound. In the event of a collapse, external miners would place low-level explosives against the crystal face and at strategic points at the floor of the cavern, forcing the explosion downwards and shattering the crystal towards the trapped victim. The separator, with all the miners carried on their person, was a long stretch of wire with the intention of absorbing the energy of the blast and stopping the explosion in its tracks. A circuit breaker, so that the detonation did not spread far enough to risk shattering the ground on which the miner stood. Alexei remembered the explanation of the safety measure in the communal briefing, only weeks after a previous collapse left 5 workers trapped beneath a layer of the dark fuel. As he checked that the final stretches of the wire were securely fastened to the rock face, Alexei remembered the arguments that had stemmed about this new imposed feature. The technicians had given their complete reassurance to all the mining staff that the safety measures of this strategy had been explored multiple times in computer simulations under all variations. The program had been able to calculate and test hundreds of possible outcomes in mere seconds. It had never been tested under these certain measures, and despite the assurances, there was something unnerving about putting your faith in such an alarming-sounding strategy on the word of just a computer. He had thought as much at the time. It was adding fuel to an already life-threatening fire, dealing with a mining collapse with targeted explosions. Now, however, what time was there to think up a new solution? Alexei stood back, targeting the beam of his lights at the wire. He had already been down there too long. The suit that protected him from the minus 200-degree temperature of the mine was beginning to wear thin due to the long exposure. Even as he slowly made his way back to the safety zones, 5 feet from the wire, he could feel the skin on his back begin to dry up. The hair on his arms and legs seemed to stand on end. The panic began to rise up in him, but he forced himself to remain calm. There was nothing to be gained by losing himself to the anxiety. He could get out, and his crew were barely a mile away, more than enough time for them to blow the hole through the thick crystal walls that separated them. Then they could hoist him back to base, recharge the suit, and he'd be laughing about this in the canteen before you could say, the torchlight flickered. Alexei stopped dead in his tracks. For the briefest of moments, the light coming from the helmet lamp, the only means of sight he had seemed extinguished. Though it stood steady now, and again the messenger light hummed lowly and quietly in front of him.
We're ready. The sequence is set. Give us the signal when you're safe.
Alexei kept moving towards the safety zone, his breath hot in the limited air in front of him. He reached a spot where the blast would have the minimal risk, and positioned himself in a crouching position, able to shield himself from whatever detritus may occur while simultaneously ready to move. He spared a small moment to say a silent prayer, and to also swear that if the technician's words were true and he got out of this, he would ensure that those two paid for no drinks that night. Ensuring that he was on stable ground, he opened up his communicator. And then everything went black. Alexei froze, his fingers resting just above the keyboard that he could no longer see. He reached up, pressing the switch on the side of his mask to activate the light beams. Nothing. His eyes flashed around the space, trying to make sense of something, anything, some shape. But all that his eyes could see came from inside the helmet, the icons and the measurements that seemed projected onto the void. Alexei found himself sitting down, the shock flying through his whole body. Why? What would change that would make... And then he realized he was no longer cold. The primary function of the suit, to keep him warm and able to breathe, was doing just that, even on low power, by drawing energy from the non-essential areas of the suit. Unable to keep the panic at bay, Alexei frantically tried typing a message, but the words were incomprehensible. The symbols on his helmet only reflected inside the screen. They would give him nothing. He tried to stand, frantically turning his head this way and that, trying to remember which direction he had to be facing, but he had to stay still. He couldn't risk moving too close to the destination. If he went beyond the wire, he was done for. The message icon flashed again, but even that light seemed faded. The computer's voice rang out again, impersonal and without urgency.
Are you at a safe distance? Respond.
Alexei kept his eyes glued to the messenger icon, just to give him something to see, but even that faded. The dark space surrounding him seemed to have shrunk somehow. He felt trapped, more alone than ever before in his life. He jabbed frantically at where he thought the send button was, having no idea what he was actually sending to them. Inadvertently, he heard himself gasp for air, and realized it was the first organic sound he had heard in he didn't know how long. The silence seemed so much more present now. The only thing his senses picked up was the rustle of his suit, that damn suit against his skin like a cocoon of dry metal and plastic. No messenger icon played this time, although maybe his eyes were blinking so much in the darkness he couldn't have seen it, but he heard the computer's voice once more.
We're blowing now, get ready.
The voice faded. The suit was drawing all the energy just to keep him alive in this void. Alexei moved, the only direction he could be certain of, downwards, sinking to his knees in an effort to feel secure. He must be safe from the blast. They would find him. He'd see the lights coming down, hear the noise of the cracking crystal, the sounds of wires being lowered. There would be something, anything, a break from this darkness, this emptiness, this nothing. Any second now. Any second now. Any second now. Any second now.
I'm gonna go and open a window. It suddenly feels a lot more claustrophobic in here than it did 10 minutes ago.
That was chilling.
Oh my gosh.
The imagery in
Is
that.
he dead?
It's
Is he going to die?
well, it's that's the power of an open ending.
Why do you do this, Mischa?
Well,
I'm so worried about him.
what one of the themes that sort of picked up whilst I was writing this, initially inadvertently, was this idea of this reliance of technology that you don't fully understand for your safety measures. Like throughout, that's what I was leaning into with the whole escalation theme. Like new things keep going wrong. And even when they're going right, the consequences of keeping the energy to keep him alive but leaving him in this sensory void. That's what I was going for. And then with the open ending, you get this idea that maybe that's continued and something has gone wrong with the other side. Something's gone wrong with the explosives. Something's gone wrong to the miners. And so there is this uncertainty. I originally considered having it ending where they picked him up and it was only a few hours later because they didn't have enough to get through the initial rock base. But I think I decided that it's kind of more interesting to allow this sort of gap and uncertainty that you could believe, but at the same time you can't certainly be sure of.
We're just going to have to get you onto another
it's more
episode
powerful.
and we'll get you to write a sequel and we'll say, right, the sequel must have a happy ending. We'll just have Alexei going to the shops or something with his partner.
The prompt
all
for this
happy.
week, and then Alexei climbed out of the cave.
Yeah. Exactly. He has to survive. He has to. I just loved how
maybe-
much I could visualise
how-
every single image that you had in there. I just thought that was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Like there's so much tech that he's got, and it's not helping. It's not helping at all.
That is entirely not inspired by my difficulties of using my tech to set up a podcast.
Tech is so
We
hard.
had a good setup.
I wasn't talking about your podcast.
Oh, your one.
No,
Oh.
I'm kidding. We're actually very, technologically well-sounding, and all is entirely flawless, and you should check it out.
You have fancy music, and I'm very jealous of that.
We should have a battle between our podcasts. Who has the best tech setup?
I must warn you, my tech setup includes a very judgmental raven, so you're on the back foot there.
Oh, go on, tell us about the Raven, because everyone wants to know about the Raven.
Okay, fair enough. So a few years ago, I got as a gift from a philosophy tutor that I had for a while, this kind of, it's not stuff, it's this like toy prop raven that's on this like wooden perch, and that's just been with me throughout my entire university career, just sort of being on my desk, looking all dramatic and glaring. And now I have that as a writing partner, so he can glare at me and encourage me to write better and tell me to stop procrastinating.
Your tutors give you
Nothing like
presents.
the
That's
judgmental gaze of
amazing.
the crow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Well,
that.
what can I say?
What's-
The judgmental gaze of a crow is a very useful tool in these modern times.
It gets you through.
Speaking of judgmental, I'm very judgmental of Izzy's piece because it reminds me of the seminar I just got out of. I was like, finally, I've got out my Anthony and Cleopatra seminar. I'm free. I never have to think about it again. But no.
Yeah, so my piece is inspired by Antony and Cleopatra, just because I thought Erin would appreciate it. A little bit of revision. Okay, when Erin gets a good grade this year, it's all my fault, okay? That's basically how it goes here.
Now, for those of you
I'm
who
not
don't,
writing about Anthony and Cleopatra.
now for those of you who aren't familiar with the story of Anthony and Cleopatra, we're now going to read the entire play just so it makes sense.
Can we? I need to finish my reading. I'll give you a little summary. So, basically, in Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, Antony Cleopatra in love in quotation marks. It's either love for each other or love for the power that the other has, or something in between. And there's a scene in the beginning of the play where Antony finds out that his wife Fulvia is dead. And so I think it's interesting. Spoilers. And I think it's...
Spoilers, it's been out since the 1600s. You've had plenty of time to read it.
I think it's not spoilers that someone from the ancient Rome is dead. I think they're all dead. I would think. And so I just thought it was interesting that there's this character Fulvia who never appears on stage, never gets a single line, but yet she has a lot of the opening scenes talking about her. So I did a little research into the real Fulvia, and that's where my screenplay came from.
Oh wow, so this is your version of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead spin-off.
Yeah, and basically, just taking a minor character and giving them a little bit more of the spotlight. I'm just trying to think if there's any context that I need to give for Fulvia. Basically, Fulvia is Antony's wife. Mark Antony is one of the three people who run the Roman... Who run Rome, which is basically in charge of the world at this point. So 3 people who run Rome are Octavius, Antony, and some other guy called Lepidus. And Octavius and Antony are starting to butt heads a little bit because they both want the power at the end of the day. You can't have 3 rulers, you got to have 1. So...
Would you also like to explain what you've done to Mischa in this piece?
Evil laughter. So I'm playing one character. I'm playing Fulvia. Erin is playing Antony's brother, Lucius, who commands an army, and Mischa is playing everyone else.
And I have to give them all distinct voices, so I apologise to a plethora of people in advance.
You're a theatre student. You got this.
Was a theatre student. I now have no academic backing.
Oh no.
So this piece is called The Commander of Commanders. Take it away, Mischa.
Exterior, soldier's tent, day. A soldier spits on a stone and runs it along his sword. Other soldiers weave around the patch of grass he sits on. A second soldier comes out of a tent and tosses a coin to the first. Second soldier. Don't rub it in, all right? First soldier. She's making a speech. Again already. Second soldier. Well, she'd at least wait until Lucius has let her go. The first soldier puts his sword down and turns the coin over in his hand. It bears Fulvia's face. Exterior, podium, day. Fulvia, 40s, stands on her podium outside her tent. Her hair is slicked into a bun and she wears a Roman dress. Lucius, 30s, sits beside her and looks out to the army that crowds around them.
Brave men, I grieve for 2 husbands. Do not let me grieve a third. Every day the child who calls himself Caesar weaves another yarn into the web of his conspiracy to kill Antony. I, Antony's wife, cannot sit idly as I'm transformed into a widow thrice over. Win us Perusia, and you will be rewarded with fertile land.
The soldiers cheer. Interior, Fulvia's tent, day. Fulvia's hair tumbles down as she pulls out her hairpin. Red linen cascades from the centre poles of her tent. A silhouette hovers outside.
You have a message for me?
Lucius moves into the opening of the tent.
Oh, just you.
When did you last hear from Antony?
When did you?
Monday. You?
When he hears I'm fighting Caesar, his ally, he'll come back.
Is this what all this is for? Your husband stopped answering your messages, so you're starting a war.
No, this is my war.
Our war.
Fulvia takes a hairpin from her boot and strokes it sharp and lightly against his throat.
Caesar will execute you if you say that.
If we just had Antony, then...
Fulvia drops the hairpin to the floor.
Cleopatra treating him well?
He's infatuated with her.
Good.
The blacksmith enters with armour fitted to Fulvia's figure. She takes it, nods, and he leaves.
Good?
Yeah?
You're losing him. The man who owns a third of the world.
Is putty in my hands.
Not your hands.
He's making alliances with Egypt.
He is having an affair.
Fulvia laughs, takes the collar of Lucius's armour and pulls his face to hers.
Same difference.
She gently pushes him away.
Are you sure he's coming back?
If I can send him to Cleopatra, I can bring him back.
You sent him?
I've planted the seed, watered it with whispers of Venus personified.
She takes 2 vials and fills them with red wine. Lucius' drink spills onto the red carpet.
Oh, Mark, I heard rumours that Cleopatra invited her starving people into her home so they could eat her grain.
She hands a drink to Lucius and sips hers.
I have always thrived without a husband at home. Nothing against your brother, of course.
You fed him to a snake.
I fed Cleopatra to him. Now, as she conquers the world, Antony and I will defeat the young Caesar. And once the world is Antony's, who will the people choose to be his queen? The Roman wife who has unofficially ruled for the past decade? Or Antony's foreign mistress?
And once they've chosen you, when Antony runs off back to Egypt, you will choose me to take his place?
Exactly.
They kiss. Exterior battlefield, day. Fulvia rides her horse side saddle. She trots over the bodies of Caesar's forces. Her armors gleam in the Italian sun as she enters the gates of Perusia. Interior, Cleopatra's palace. Night. Antony hands a letter to Cleopatra. Fulvia is dead. Dead. Fulvia. Can Fulvia die?
Oh, I've not had seething romantic tension with Izzy in ages.
A lovely romance scene.
Big sort of politics prequel energy.
Yeah, that's just I
Coffee is very terrifying.
just found it interesting, the politics and how Fulvia, she has 3 husbands and she uses each one as a pawn in her game of chess, and I just think she's a cool character because of that.
What was it about Fulvia that you sort of found yourself drawn to, and how were you trying to personify her in contrast to the way that she's talked about in the original play?
That's a good question. I think in the original play, she's personified as basically someone who Cleopatra is jealous of. And at first it can kind of read as, oh, Shakespeare's just making Cleopatra's one trait as being a jealous woman. But then you can also read into it and think, well, has Fulvia given Cleopatra reason to be jealous? Like, Fulvia must be powerful herself for a queen to find her threatening. So then I looked into it, and Fulvia was the unofficial 4th ruler of the world, according to some sources. So I thought, okay, why is she only written down as Mark Antony's wife when she ruled the world unofficially?
No, definitely material for a spin-off if ever I heard it.
Yeah. She also just fought the first Emperor Augustus, just her armies against his. She didn't win, but to try is pretty. You gotta be pretty strong to try.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I feel very sorry for the soldiers outside her tent. I imagine they don't make it back.
I mean, she wins this battle. It's just 15 minutes later. I mean, say 15 minutes. Probably a few days. I don't know, accounts differ. But she is allowed to live. She doesn't die from the battle. She's allowed to live. It's just she dies from natural causes. And history is kind of saying that if she didn't just die of natural causes, then Antony and Augustus would have fought a lot sooner, which basically means we would have had a different emperor, potentially.
Actually, a different history.
Yeah, a different history. You guys can tell I've done a lot of reading.
No, it's good.
Is Augustus the reason we have the month August?
He named himself after... I found out
Julius
today.
and Julius, I think.
Yeah. Emperor Augustus named himself after the month that he defeated Cleopatra.
Oh, I thought it was the other way round. That makes sense.
No, that's what I thought, but my tutor said something different. If it's wrong, then that's not my fault. It's my tutor.
Check your facts unprompted. We don't know what we're doing.
Speaking of Caesar,
I hope she wouldn't be wrong.
I just bring it up because of the coincidence of timing. But earlier today, I was listening to a sort of like comedy satire retelling of the assassination of Caesar by and talking about like how they're going to deal with Mark Antony and the various assassinations and plots they were dealing with. So I like that it's got a bit of like, for me at least, a sort of follow through historical chronologically wise.
Yeah, it's fun to just read about people and think, okay, how can I make this long bibliography like work on stage and interesting?
That's my writing tip for the week. If a character can't be interesting while trapped in a cave, they're probably not worth writing about.
Right. You know what? Because this is our season finale. This is our challenge to all the listeners until next season.
Yeah.
Write a piece of a character in a cave. Send it in.
Bonus
See what
points
happens.
if you
See
do
what
it
we
whilst in a cave.
Socially distanced, of course. Oh dear. Izzy, I think you were going to do a segue. What was your segue?
Yeah, my segue, well, we mentioned interesting, and I was going to say, speaking of interesting, Erin's very interesting, and I'm sure her piece is very interesting too.
Segues are just nailed on this show.
Oh, I know. We're so good at them, honestly. Alright, I have written because I clearly had D&D on the brain this week, I have written a fantasy thing. I've tried to write a backwards poem, which is basically a poem that reads one way and then you read it backwards. So you don't read like every word backwards, but you read lines backwards. I did one for my assessments and it was very fun, so I thought I'd get into some more practice. You were so glad that you found us on that frosty morning. You didn't want to return, haunting taverns, wandering streets, searching for a purpose. We found you in your travels, seeking adventure. I was afraid your recklessness would hurt us. You didn't. You promised to keep us safe. You are brave. I was a fool to think the rumours of your temper were true. We are stronger together, not apart. Your spells and my sword and her potions. You protected us from harmful creatures. It didn't matter that your aim of destructive spells wavered. Fate. It's not your fault she lies unbreathing. I can see that you tried everything you could. It wasn't enough. Stay, don't leave. Forgiveness is a tricky thing for me, but I'm trying. Okay, and then you read it from the bottom up. I'm trying. For me, forgiveness is a tricky thing. Leave, don't stay. It wasn't enough you tried everything you could. I can see that she lies unbreathing. Your fault, it's not fate. Your aim of destructive spells wavered. It didn't matter that you protected us from harmful creatures. Your spells and my sword and her potions. Apart, not together, we are stronger. The rumours of your temple were true. I was a fool to think you are brave. You promised to keep us safe. You didn't. I was afraid your recklessness would hurt us. Seeking adventure, we found you in your travels. Haunting taverns, wandering streets, searching for a purpose. You didn't want to return on that frosty morning. You were so glad that you had found us.
Erin! How long did it take you to put all of that together so that it made sense both ways and had different meanings?
What point did you start your writing from? That's my question, sorry.
Okay, first question, I'll be honest with you, Izzy. I wrote this while I was waiting for a pizza to cook, and then while eating said pizza, so about half an hour.
What?
That's a half-hour job?
What was your question, Mischa?
I was going to ask, did you start from a particular direction? Like, did you write it backwards first or forward first? Or was it sort of like, did you find a midpoint in the poem that you could sort of divulge in both directions off of?
I kind of thought of the story, so one way it's they're trusting their friend and the other way they're getting their friend to leave. Backwards poems are kind of hard. It's a lot of trial and error. One of the kind of tactics you can have is that you have a statement and then some sort of word in a negative and then another one. So I was afraid your recklessness would hurt. Yeah. I was afraid your recklessness would hurt us. 1 line. You didn't. 2 lines. You promised to keep us safe. 3 lines. But when you read that backwards, it just contradicts the third line, not the first. So yeah, it was just lots of trial and error and getting angry at the English language, which I do on a daily basis. But
fair enough. The English language is not valid, and this is a call out.
Should we just start speaking something else now?
Well, that it can make a vieille ville.
Oh no!
It's when I have to teach things like I don't know, like the word bought and brought. Like 1 letter difference, but they're completely different words. Or you've got like practice and practice, where there are 2 different letters and they mean different things. Or my personal favourite, produce and produce, which mean different things depending on where you put the stress.
Oh, I see.
It's ridiculous. Why
It's
do
a
we
bigger
have
problem
these
for me
words?
because I always have the stress everywhere.
Mischa, when you spoke a different
Wonderful.
language just then, what did you say? You could have said
I was
anything.
just saying I can say something else if you wish.
Of course. I do remember, Mischa, that I did once try to learn how to say hello, how are you in
We should say to our listeners
language
before
and-
there is a chance that there may be some Dutch coming up, so this is an official health warning.
No, I tried to learn how to say hello, how are you in Dutch, and I remember saying it to you and you just looking at me and just going, what did you just say? Because my pronunciation was so bad you didn't recognise it as Dutch.
It's okay. I honestly like the Dutch is such a ridiculous language. Like, I'm allowed to say that. I'm half Dutch, but it is a little bit ridiculous. Never ask for directions in Utrecht. We're washing your hair for a month.
Oh, Dutch
Oh,
listeners
okay.
will love that. Speaking of listeners,
Okay.
did we want to do like a few congratulations? Yep. So I was just going to say congratulations to Carrie for winning the Financial Times writing competition and also many other competitions. She's just won everything. And I've read her writing and it's absolutely beautiful. So congratulations for that. And then also congratulations to everyone who has been participating in NaNoWriMo and everyone who's been participating in Flash Nano as well. I hope you guys are all super proud of what you've done because we're coming up to the end of November now. And by the time it goes out, it'll be the end of November. But yeah, I hope you guys are all super
Yes,
proud
will.
of what you've done and had a good time doing it.
Congratulations to everyone
Wonderful.
and to all our writers who keep listening. I just hope you keep on writing.
Is this just like this is the same Carrie that sent us a message the other day that got passed around the group chat in all caps? Like, look, someone said something lovely.
Yeah.
This is that.
This is that Carrie.
Carrie, that's what happened to your message. It was good. Okay. All right. Thank you to all of our writers on today's show and to everyone for listening. Thank you, Mischa, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
It was wonderful having you on. To support us, subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/promptedwritingpodcast for bonus content and shout outs. I believe we have some stuff on there now. And our YouTube, which is Prompted Writing Podcast. Be sure to leave us a review telling us what you think. For more prompts and writing, find us on Instagram at Prompted Writing Podcast. And thank you again for listening. And as this is our season finale, thank you to all the writers we've had on this series thus far. Hit the outro.